Yeah, so welcome to the fascinating world of AI and artificial intelligence. My name is Tapan, and I manage payments at Intellect Global Transaction Banking. Let's start off with an audience poll. What is your view on generative AI? It's more buzz than reality? Is it too risky for banks? It can only be used to generate fake images and poems. It has some potential for banking, or it has tremendous potential for banking. Oh, amazing. Yeah, it's dropping now. Yeah, so it's very interesting to see that a lot of you believe that generative AI and AI have potential in the banking space. And it's particularly important because today the economic environment is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. If you look at the banking sector, it's hyper-regulated. The banks are challenged by fintechs. You have Guava Pay, you have Mango Pay, Thunes, Buxy, Wise, you name it. There are dime and dozen payment companies. Products that were offered by banks, current accounts, savings accounts, credit cards, multi-currency virtual IBANs for global collections and receivables, they are all offered by fintechs. Banks are under pressure from regulators and also saddled with legacy mainframe IT architectures. And not only that, the high interest rate scenario is creating a capital and liquidity crisis for banks. Looking at the regulatory space, the regulators are keeping banks and corporates and the entire economy on their toes. You have the Digital Operational Resilience Act, you have the Credit Card Competition Act, the Law of Consumer Duty in the UK, markets in crypto assets, the new payments architecture, and we just spoke of the G20 CPMI directives to make payments faster, cheaper, transparent, putting so much pressure on the entire environment, right? And then if you look at the corporate space and corporate treasury, corporates are all looking at improving their performance. Performance in terms of collections and receivables, performance in terms of cash flows and bottom line growth, and all of this took a huge hit during the pandemic. Performance and growth. If you look at growth, corporates want to grow their top line, grow their revenue, and they need to raise capital to grow their revenue and to expand. To raise capital, they are finding it hard because interest rates have gone up, so investment is slowing down. At the same time, corporates demand agility and connectivity. They want to open subsidiaries in multiple locations and across countries, open accounts, and do business seamlessly across borders. Sustainability is a huge focus amongst corporates. You have the Corporate Sustainability Directive in place. And corporates are not only looking at internal sustainability, but the entire sustainability of their supply chain. In the opening session today, I think the BAFT speaker spoke of human capital. Resource development is a huge focus area for corporates. They need to constantly develop their human capital, retrain them, and reskill them as the economic environment around us is constantly changing. So all of these create the perfect storm for artificial intelligence technologies to be used so that you can manage this uncertainty. And within the payment space in particular, payments is one area which has been highly disintermediated by fintechs. There has been enormous volume growth in payments, and there is a lot of revenue pressure. The previous panel just spoke of how fintechs are able to offer payments at very low fees and at very attractive FX rates. These are things that banks just can't manage, right? And apart from all of this, and I think a lot of the panels have spoken about it, one of the major changes in payments has been ISO 20022. And this is particularly important from an AI and generative AI perspective. Earlier, a payment message carried payment information, ordering customer, beneficiary, sender's correspondent, receiver's correspondent, and very few lines of remittance information. and that too unstructured remittance information. But with ISO 20022, you have a lot of structured remittance data: invoice number, invoice amount, invoice due date, pay by date, discount amount, tax amount, et cetera, right? All of this structured remittance data makes it that much more beneficial to be exploited for generating insights, for generating next best actions and next best offers to the corporate treasurer. So banks can actually exploit this data that comes in an ISO 20022 message and use it to provide insights to their corporate customers and to compete with the fintechs. So the conditions for the usage of AI and generative AI are really ripe. In the last 5 years, we had 24 countries migrate to instant payments. Today, over 70 countries have real-time payment rails. There were 195 billion instant payments processed in 2022, which represents a 63% year-on-year growth. And this is particularly important because most of the domestic real-time payment rails use ISO 20022 as a format, and they carry a huge amount of structured information with them. Again, post the pandemic, the usage of cash and checks have declined, leading to a preponderance of digital payments. So all of this is creating the right conditions for the usage of AI for data mining and analytics. And not only are the business conditions in place, but the technology conditions are also in place. See, many times we have the right idea, but the technology may not be there. Or we might have the technology, but the technology might be very early, right, in its timing. But today, not only do we have the data, especially in the payment space in digital form, we have large computing power, we have cloud-based architectures, we have GPUs and chips which are being designed to execute generative AI algorithms at runtime, at scale. So it's really the right timing for both AI and generative AI. So AI has been around for quite some time. Traditional AI, which is machine learning, robotic process automation, deep learning, computer vision, and these have benefited the industry tremendously. Today's SWIFT processes over 50 million messages a day. Out of that, 20 million are payment messages. There was a study done by LexisNexis which found that 15% of global payments require some form of repair or enrichment, right? And AI and ML technologies have actually led to a significant improvement and reduction in the false positive rate of close to 50 to 60%. The same study found that the average global cost of repairing a payment manually, whether it's for sanctions or AML or fraud or enrichment, is $12.1, right? So the operational cost is very high, and this is where traditional AI, which is identifying patterns and using those patterns to reduce fraud, reduce sanctions, AML, and fraud, tried and tested, and will continue to coexist along with generative AI. So this is one area of AI which is different from generative AI. Generative AI, I'm moving on to the next slide, which is the creation or the generation of content, as the name applies. Generative AI is all about generating content, which could be text, it could be images or audio, video, or PowerPoint presentations. Generative AI is about knowledge summarization and code generation. I'll show you a demo shortly about code generation using generative AI. And this has really taken the world by storm. ChatGPT reached 100 million active users within 2 months of launch. This is really amazing, given that TikTok took 9 months and Instagram took 2 years. GPT-4, which is the latest model of ChatGPT, is rumored to have 1.75 trillion parameters compared to GPT-3's 250 billion parameters. A PwC study reveals that AI and generative AI put together could have a $15.7 trillion impact on the global economy. A lot of the analysts say that generative AI has tremendous potential. In fact, a McKinsey study says that generative AI can be a $4.4 trillion opportunity. I was reading a US labor market report commissioned by Accenture, which found that executives like you, all of you and myself, spend close to 65% of our time writing emails, generating content, creating PowerPoint presentations, writing minutes of meetings and memos and action items, right? 65% of an average executive's time is spent generating content. If you can save 60% of that time using generative AI, 60 times 65, you're talking of a 40% improvement in labor productivity. And a 40% improvement in labor productivity, according to another JPM Insights report, could result in a 1.5 to 3% improvement in real GDP. So generative AI has tremendous potential, and it's not just a hype, because what we see, especially in the payments space, we have a lot of digital data with ISO 20022, and this is only going to increase as time moves on. Today, I think only 15% of payment messages actually supply the data, the structured remittance data. But as time moves on and the adoption increases, more and more data will come in. So it's not just a hype. You have the data, you have the technology, and you just have to mine it, right? So now let me show you a real demo of an application that we developed and launched at Sibos. It's called the iGTB Copilot for Payments Relationship Managers. We developed this application along with one of our clients in Canada, our banking partner in Canada. So this application uses Microsoft Azure OpenAI for the open generative AI technology. It uses some of our own Intellect AI data models and algorithms. And it uses the ISO 20022 Payments and Remittance Repository. So this is an application that we have developed, and this bank where we actually tested this iGTB Copilot uses our ISO 200 payments, it uses our payment hub, and it also uses our Payments and Remittance Repository. What this application does, think of it as a large data warehouse. As and when a payment transaction comes into the bank, whether it's a PAX 008 or a PAIN 001 or an REMT 001, it will extract the structured and unstructured remittance information and store it in a remittance repository. And it will store the core payments data in the payments repository. It will maintain a linkage between the payments repository and the remittance repository and make all the remittance information available via API to downstream systems for AML sanctions compliance, or on the digital channel, it can be exposed to the corporate customer. So think of it as a large data warehouse. And then we have the iGTB payments back office application. So the payments relationship manager would interact with this application using natural language. So how this works is that the iGTB Copilot user interface is where a query is entered in natural language. That query is first classified. Is it a general purpose question like, hi, how's the weather today? If it's a general purpose question, the Microsoft Azure OpenAI gives a general purpose answer, like it's bright and sunny today, right? But if the natural language question is something like, give me a list of all my customers whose payment volumes have been declining over the last 6 months, then the system understands that this information or this answer needs to be retrieved from the application database. It will then convert this question into a SQL code or Python code or an API call, communicate with the backend ISO 20022 remittance repository and payments repository, fetch the data, and once the data has been fetched, it would then convert the response back into natural language using Azure OpenAI and Pandas filters. And the result would be returned back to the relationship manager. Right? So let me show you the actual application. So this is the product showcase. And I actually have the application on my laptop. I've taken screenshots here because I was advised not to do a live demo in case there's connectivity issues. So if anyone is keen to play around with the application, feel free to meet me outside. So this is the login page for the bank relationship manager. The relationship manager logs in and he's presented with his RM dashboard. And on the top right-hand side, you can see the iGTB Copilot, which is the generative AI assistant for the bank relationship manager. So the RM clicks on that icon, and Lisa, the iGTB Copilot for payments, comes up and says, "Hello, how can I assist you today?" And the RM says, "Tell me about my customer's payments." So Lisa goes back into the database so that natural language question is understood by using generative AI. It's converted into a set of SQL code and Python code, and real data is retrieved from the database, saying you have made a total of so many payments, and the total amount was so much, and on average, each payment was XYZ, and it also has the intelligence to show it as a graph, as a histogram. And then it's smart enough to actually also suggest you might also want to see payment types and payment errors. So initially, I used to be a skeptic of AI. And my wife had once ordered a cosmetic cream which didn't get delivered, but according to the cosmetics company, it got delivered. So I called up the delivery company, and guess what? There was an AI chatbot at the other end. And it just refused to understand my accent. It was a nightmare. So but this thing is really clever. I mean, once we started working with it and I saw how it's coming up with answers and prompts, it's really impressive. So you might also want to see payment types and payment errors. So the relationship manager asks, what are the trends in my payments over time? And the software responds back with a graph giving a trend of the payments transacted over the last 9 months. And no code is written for this. All we are doing is calling the generative AI to convert the English language question into a SQL query or Python code, and no data is going into the public cloud. So we get back a metadata which says like select customer, comma, hash amount, comma, this, group by time, etc., right? And then we run that query. So the actual data is not going to the public cloud. So tell me which of my customers have delayed payments in the last 9 months is a question that the relationship manager asks. Because with ISO 20022, you can easily compare the payment date to the invoice date. And if a customer is consistently receiving payments late, you could cross-sell a receivables finance or a working capital finance product to the customer. If the corporate customer is consistently making early payments and for the full invoice amount, it means that the corporate customer has excess liquidity, and you could possibly cross-sell an investment product or a liability product to the customer. Right? So there's a lot of opportunities for cross-sell and upsell using ISO 20022. So Lisa comes back and says the customers who had delayed payments in the last 9 months are as follows, and it gives a full list of customers who are actually in the database with delayed payments, and suggesting, do you want to see delayed payment reasons or delayed payment frequency? The relationship manager says, tell me more about delayed payments for Molina PLC, one of the customers on the list. And Lisa comes back with an answer saying there were so many instances of delayed payments, this was the total amount, etc., etc. Right? The RM wants to know what were the amounts of the delayed payments for Molina PLC, and Lisa comes back querying the database with a list of payments and amounts. Again, it's smart enough to decide on its own that if the result set is small, I might as well display it as text, but if the result set is large, I'll convert it into a graph. Then the RM asks, can you draft a letter to Molina PLC introducing them to the feature of request for pay? So this is where the productivity enhancement comes in, right? If the RM were to draft a letter, it would take time. And Lisa is then able to, the generative AI copilot, the iGTB copilot, is able to draft a letter for the RM saying XYZ and introducing you to our product. You can also attach a template. So this really improves productivity for the relationship manager. And it can not only be used by relationship managers, banks can also offer it to their corporate customers. So it's a very neat application, and we believe we have currently built it for payments, but it has applications across all areas of transaction banking, whether it's collections, receivables, cash flow forecasting, trade and supply chain finance, and digital engagement, which is the corporate customer actually using the generative AI copilot. So everything looks good, but like all new technologies, there could be issues, and I'm sure all of us are aware that generative AI has its own challenges of explainability, bias, hallucinations, ID, copyright, the ability to send phishing emails using generative AI, etc. But the regulators are doing their bit. We have the EU AI Act. In Canada, there is Bill C-27 and AIDA. China has done a lot of work with respect to the deep synthesis regulation, the generative AI regulation, and the algorithmic recommendation regulation. So in China, if there's any content, you're supposed to disclose if it's generated content or real content, and they've drafted regulations to prevent bias, etc. And OpenAI has its own terms and conditions of supplier code of conduct. So the industry will gradually move towards responsible AI. And if you look at the application that we developed, right, the iGTB Copilot for payments relationship managers, some of these issues do not occur there because we use Microsoft Azure OpenAI, which provides the entire compliance and security. And then we are actually generating code, right? The English language question is being converted into code. It's basically a code generator. And then the code is executing of a real database. So to that extent, it's explainable. It's not completely hallucinatory or imaginative. We're not leaving it completely to the generative AI. So it's quite reliable and quite interesting. And I strongly believe that generative AI has a lot of potential in the future. Indeed, we could be at the cusp of a new industrial revolution as things move on. So that's what I had to cover, but I also have a very nice video, which I'll run for 1 minute. The full video is for 3 minutes, and it's on YouTube. Oops, what happened? How do I play the video? Can you play the video, please?
Good morning, Alexa.
Good morning, Lisa. I've noticed 5 overdue U.S. invoices, but insufficient funds to pay them from your usual account.
Uh-oh. One of them's to pay that blasted hotel. Well, I don't want to cash in my investments, but if I don't pay now, there'll be no launch.
There are sufficient funds in your U.S. instant account as well as in your U.S. dollar account in Germany. So your options are: borrow from us at 1.5% PA, withdraw from your U.S. instant account, losing 0.5% interest PA, or create an intercompany loan from your German subsidiary's U.S. account, losing only 0.25% interest PA. The recommended best next action is an intercompany loan from your German operations at a £12 fee. Shall I proceed?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Brilliant. My bank really understands my business. It gives me alternative solutions that make sense. I can't believe I'm paying more fees to this bank than ever. Yet I just love them.
Yeah. So this is a smart speaker, and this is real. This is not just marketing. I've actually demoed this to prospective banks, where I actually tell the speaker, tell the Alexa speaker, log me into iGTB Bank. And then it says, give me the magic word. So I say 364524. And then Alexa tells, okay, authorize it on your mobile. So I authorize it. And then I can speak to Alexa and say, what are my balances in my UK subsidiary? And it actually uses the same API that the digital internet banking uses to talk to the backend. It fetches the data and responds back to me in English language that these are the balances. Then I can actually tell Alexa, can you transfer $100 to John? And it has the intelligence to say, did you mean John at Commerce Bank or John at Deutsche Bank? You have 2 beneficiaries in your beneficiary database named John. So it works pretty neatly, and it's quite interesting. So I strongly believe that Gen AI is going to be the future. And thanks for your time. If you have any questions on Slido, I could take them. And if any of you want to see the application on the laptop and play around with it, you're most welcome.
Do we have any questions for Tapan? Let me ask again, are there any questions for our speaker for Tapan? Because this was so impressive. I can't believe that you don't have a single question.
Yeah.
There's one. Oh, yeah, okay, here we go.
Yeah, so the second question, what is the capacity of the system in terms of data and volume? So we ran the system along with our Canadian banking partner. They had terabytes of data in the ISO remittance repository. So we trained it using these terabytes of data. And the response time, it's not meant for the traditional AI use cases that I mentioned of AML, sanction screening, fraud, which needs to happen in the life cycle of the payment, right? It's not for those use cases. When you're doing an investigation, or if the relationship manager wants to do some queries and converse with the application, where capacity is not where the STP is not very important, right? So that's in terms of capacity. Regulatory challenges, how can you ensure that the system doesn't become too smart to start doing things on its own? Gute Frage, ich weiß nicht. I mean,
you can answer in German
still,
if you
yeah,
like.
it's still not super smart. That's what we've found, because initially when I was asking Lisa, our iGTB co-pilot, can you send a mail to the customer to introduce the feature of RFP? It kept thinking RFP is request for proposal, while I meant request for pay. But with some iterations, it understood that it's request to pay. So I don't think it's going to become super smart very soon. I think we still have 25, 30 years to go. What would be the cost?
What's the price tag?
Yeah, so in terms of cost, I think today applications can be built very quickly, so your development cost is not very high. The application technologies are all modular and quite open. They provide APIs, and a lot of libraries are available. Bloomberg is building a huge financial large language model. So the cost of building the system is not high, but people say the energy cost and the compute cost of actually training these models and building these models is very high. So there could be an ESG factor here. But the actual usage cost isn't very high.
Okay, if we don't have any further questions, Tapan, I really have to say I'm A, impressed by your presentation.
Thank you.
B, I'm also impressed by your time management,
Yeah.
getting across such a complicated and complex issue. So from my side, really well done, and thank you so much for the insights you have just shared with us.